Yo, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for liking this video, commenting or subscribing. It's really appreciated. In today's video, I want to talk about, have we been in a bubble this since 2008? Has this been one gigantic bubble? Well, I have always thought so. We are now in a hyper bubble, in my opinion. But let's look at what I've observed in the last, well, what do you call it? 13, 12 years, last 12 years sort of style. So obviously, like, I watch a lot of Peter Schiff's appearances on these financial networks, and one of the things that would happen was Peter would call this we're in a huge bubble, and that the Fed had inflated this bubble with quantitative easing and record low interest rates. But the other academics on the financial networks would always say this is not a bubble, because look at the market. If we were in a bubble, like, it would be more than just Peter, that could see it. Everyone would know we're in a bubble, but nobody else sees that, so you must be wrong. And look at the valuations, look at the earnings of these companies. They're all great. So that's what justifies these sky high prices. But let's look at the formation of a bubble. What causes a bubble? Well, the first one is like a new technology, or a new hype. A new hype comes along into the marketplace. Now, in this, a new technology would be like Bitcoin. That's a new technology. That's a bubble. But real estate's probably I think is in a bubble. The stock market, I think, is definitely in a bubble. Why do I think this? Even though this is not a new technology or anything new. Well, it's really because it had formed into a massive bubble in the leading up to the financial crisis of 2008. And then the bubble burst. Things got bad for a very short space of time, but they were quite bad. But if you had just held on to stocks or real estate, they went up so much in the following years. Even they might have done this or this for a while, but eventually they went to the moon, right? And so bubbles have a way of making foolish people look really smart. So if someone can't see the bubble, if they're absolutely clueless and they just participate and they say, oh, I bought this stock for $30 and now it's $300, they get rewarded as if they're a genius. They get a big fat bonus, a thank you from their customers, more money from their customers, more recommendations, because, well, they made money, right? But a lot of people can be making that money by just not seeing the bubble or by participating. The problem is that all bubbles burst. And because real estate has, like in my country, skyrocketed in the last 20 years, right? It's absolutely skyrocketed. And it has a history of just going up pretty much the whole time. Yes, it does. However, we had a financial crisis where interest rates went lower instead of higher, and they were kept lower globally. We didn't have quantitative easing until the pandemic in my country, but we did have low interest rates, and we were able to keep those low because of what other countries were doing to suppress the value of their dollar and keep the interest rates suppressed as well. So had we not had quantitative easing in countries like the United States or Europe, we simply couldn't have had the interest rates we had. And if you look at when the housing bubble formed, what happened in my country was that, we started to get this housing bubble, and it started in one area and then it was spread, right? Investors started making all this money, having homes go up to, at the time, crazy amounts. And where they could sell in that city and move to a smaller region, buy a way nicer house, and a smaller, not so much hustle and bustle of the big city, cheaper living standards, and come down with a freehold, maybe even a brand new house built freehold, and maybe two, three, four, five, six, $700,000 in the back pocket. And those people did pretty well, I would imagine, like if they made the right decisions. But getting out of that market, getting in, but then the region started going up. So then again, the value of their real estate went up as well. But there was a lack of ability to really sell up in bigger cities and move to smaller ones, because the regions were there wasn't much difference. There was so much greed and fear of missing out that people would just look on the map. Oh, where's real estate cheaper than where I am? Oh, yeah, some like dive town with like a population of 10 people. Houses are cheap. I'm in. They just didn't care. They just did not care, and the banks did not care, and lent them the money, and it was a gravy train. And the hikes of the rents, like I've rented a house and I never noticed rent hikes, like the relentlessness of them, because rents just keep going up. So landlords would say to the tenants, your rent's gone up, your rent's gone up, your rent's gone up, and it became a real power shift of those who owned real estate and those who didn't. And those who owned real estate were very wealthy, and those who didn't were trapped in the cycle of renting a lot of the time. But you also had stocks as well, and that was, we had all these things like share buybacks from, people would get, like companies would get, this is more so in America and probably places like Europe, UK and stuff, but they would borrow money from the bank at really low rates of interest and then use it to buy their own company stock to create a demand to drive the stock price up, so people go, oh look, that stock's gone up, I want some of that because that's a good return, and then it would drive the price up. And I feel that a huge bubble formed. So while the technology didn't change, it was like the hype was look, if you bought and you just held real estate, all you would have done was make money. If you bought stocks, you would have just made money. Oh yeah, there was some times that went like this, some turbulence along the way, but it just went like this in general, right? But what they just did not seem to understand was that we had the quantitative easing distort the markets, and this had a huge effect. This did make everything go up. We were inflating prices. To prove this theory, when I knew that I was right, was when we had the COVID lockdowns in my country. We printed all this money and told everyone to stay home, and it was this huge lockdown, and they forecast that housing prices would be, dropping. When the lockdowns ended, everyone had been sent all this money, all these businesses had been like cashed up, the bank regulations had been like it was a free-for-all, you can lend to basically anybody, and people had all this money that they just, because they were stuck at home getting paid there without leaving the home apart from like essential items. A lot of people cancelled overseas trips, got their money back, or they didn't go away on holiday because they were worried about a pandemic or whatnot, and they spent that money on their real estate. The building business boomed. The money, it was crazy. What I saw, like some kind of Twilight Zone of just like everyone was flush with cash, yet we had no tourism. A whole sector of my country, which is a big tourism industry here, was gone, and yet everyone's doing better. How does that make sense? And the value of homes went up 40%, and I think it was like 50% in a 12-month period, like 50%. And nobody thought, wow, this is an emergency, it's a bubble, it's going to crash. They didn't think that. Some did, but probably 99% people thought. So let me tell you, we had the GFC, we locked down the country, overseas is in a shambles. And all that's ever happened is real estate's gone up, and there's no sign of it slowing down. Those were the headlines. There's no sign of it slowing down. So if you bought a home, you were on easy street. You had made so much money, you're like, well, what am I going to do with this newfound equity I've got? I'll buy some more and get more equity. Why would I sell? If I'd sold before the lockdowns, I would have lost, so much money. And so there was a massive hype. And also what happened was, in my country, the bank of mum and dad is bigger than like one of the institutional banks, a main player in the banking sector, because parents went, if I don't borrow against the equity in my home, my children will be stuck as tenants. Look how much money I've made in real estate, and if they don't get on the ladder, or their neighbours help their kid get on the ladder, and then of course they didn't help theirs, and they're like, oh my god, if I'd done what they'd done, you know. So mum and dad borrowed a lot of money to help these kids into homes, which, you know, now the equity has really vanished. So so that's the first stage. It's really that sort of hype, and then, you know, stage two is like euphoria. Is boom, right? Is a boom. So that's when, you know, we had the boom, like the leading up to so I'd say probably 2015 it started booming, you know, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, it just kept going up. And if you owned a home, you just made so much money in equity, it was crazy. And it was like, whoa, like people just couldn't believe. If you went to buy a home in my country, you would look and nothing had a price on it. It just said by negotiation. Everything was pretty much by negotiation. So you would see a house and go, I don't know what I could get that for. I don't know how much they want. I don't know how much to offer. And these houses, this was before the pandemic, sort of 2016, probably 2017, 2018, 2019 were definitely like this, where you could like put your house on the market on a Thursday, and on a Saturday morning the agent say, oh, I've been working so hard for you. Here's 7 offers, and they would all be more than asking price, more than what they wanted. And it was like, which offer do you want? And then they could go play these buyers off against each other and say, well, your offer's coming 10 grand below, you know, the highest offer. Can you come up? I suppose, or we don't want to lose the home. And if it kept happening to them, they would just go, oh, whatever it takes to get it, we're just sick of missing out. And at the same time, we had a shortage of rentals as well. So you didn't really want to be a tenant. It was very, very hard. The landlords could be very picky about who they, you know, if you had a pet, forget it, you weren't getting a rental, things like that, because so many professionals were looking for rentals. And the rents were insane. They were more than a mortgage. So, you know, that was sort of the boom. After the lockdowns, that was the euphoria. That's when everybody wanted real estate. I mean, they couldn't get it fast enough. And I would say nobody's factoring in risk. Nobody is factoring in risk. Nobody's factoring in what if, because they cannot see a situation. You know, I'd say, what if interest rates hit 6%? I remember one person went, interest rates will never go to 6%. They're going to they're almost at 7%, and they will definitely be 7% by December. Then what was the other one? Factoring in like maybe layoffs, you know, tenants losing their job and not being able to pay $700-800 a week for a house, and like so many people are being laid off, that you can't ask for that money. You need that money to service the debt. That was crazy to suggest that. Rent only ever goes up, housing goes up. The gravy train isn't going to stop. So nobody was factoring in risk. It was just 100% euphoria. And then comes the bust, which is where we are now, I believe. So prices have been coming down in my country on real estate, for example, $10,000 a month, I think, this year, right? And every time they raise interest rates, it gets harder to sell, harder to get the money, and harder to get those high prices, because people are going, well. Plus, they have the inflation to deal with and their cost of living. So they have to factor, okay, my cost of living is so high now, and then like my interest rates could keep going up, and who knows what I'm going to pay in 2 years or a year when this thing comes up for renewal. Interest rates could be 10 or 12%. I'm not going to borrow $1 million if, you know, that's the case. So prices have been going like this, but they can stay still quite high for a little while in these busts. We haven't reached the 5th stage yet, and definitely not in stocks. Stocks have been, they're in the bust. They're sort of doing this on the way down, right? Bitcoin's the same thing. Everything's coming down. but it can stay hovering up there way longer than it should. And if we hit the bust, the panic, here's what happens is that people want out. People are forced out. We have margin calls. All these things happen where, people are watching things go like this, and they don't, they just want to get out while they can, and salvage what they can, or people get wiped out. So that's the last stage is just the panic. Like if you look at something like 2008, when that finished, that was a panic. The stock market crash of 1929 was a panic. We haven't had a panic yet. People are still waiting for a Fed pivot, or things will get better, or this is just a short-term problem. I don't personally believe that it is a short-term problem. I believe that we are, like most people, do not understand the severity of what is coming, and it is going to be extremely severe and extremely drawn out. And this will be one for the record books. They will study this for years. That's my opinion. So, and my question for you is, are we in a bust? I personally think, well, real estate is on a bust. It isn't in a panic yet, but there will be people who are panicking. The other thing is, with real estate, is that the media is not really reporting it, I think, in depth, simply because the banking system in this country is very fragile from all the debt. We have a massive debt bomb. We have so much debt in this economy, in this system, and the banks and the government and the financial system are all at risk from a panic situation. So the sort of narrative is like, now's the time to buy. The bottom is in. We just don't have a crystal ball. You better buy something quickly. Don't listen to bad news, only listen to good news. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am just trying to say my perspective and see if it helps you get prepared, because I want people to be prepared for this collapse, because I feel it's going to wipe a lot of people out. So write in the comments, do you think we are? Where do you think we are? Do you think we have had a bubble, a bust, a boom? When do you think the panic's going to be? Write it down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.